Yo. Hi, yo. Hi, yo. All right. Welcome back to the Retic Rebellion Podcast. It is Retics versus Carpet Pythons. And today our guest is TJ Chambers from Chambers Serpents. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys? Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad you
Glad to
came
have you,
on.
man. Hell yeah.
Another versus gonna be in the books for this one. Let's do it.
Hell yeah.
This is gonna be a fun one. So TJ, me and you go back. So like I remember, like, I don't know if it was like your infancy stage or like your beginning stage of getting into carpets was what? How many years ago?
Probably like 6 years ago. I think. Yeah.
Okay. So I know a bit about you. Introduce yourself to our community of super dwarf / mainland / dwarf / Todd. Hi, community.
Well, I'm gonna disappoint your whole community by saying I don't own a single retic.
Not a
But
big
We'll
deal.
change that. Don't worry.
I don't know. You're gonna have. I'm limited on space. I'm overflowing over here, but.
Don't worry, I have a breeding female. She's only like 6 feet, so she'll put your carpets and run for her money and run for the money.
Yeah, that's probably bigger than already my biggest carpet pythons.
I think you'd be surprised. She's quite small.
Okay, that's cool. Is she a breeder at that size?
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Hell
she's 7. She's 7 years old, about 6.5 feet, maybe max. But she weighs probably about the same as like a big ball python breeder female. As
Okay,
far as like weight goes.
probably looks similar to a big carpet python,
Mhm.
the way
Yep,
that they're
just
built.
different head
and
shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I'm TJ Chambers from Chambers Serpents. I primarily keep carpet pythons. I also have a fair amount of other arboreal snakes. I keep and have successfully bred scrub pythons in the past. I have some emerald tree boas, green tree pythons, apodora, Jamaican boas, some boa morphs, but pretty much everything I keep kind of stays in that arboreal, semi-arboreal stuff that is kind of the long, slender, muscular body structure with that big blocky head. That's pretty much my jam when it comes to snakes. I'm really into just the python and boa body type. I don't own any. Actually, I do own one colubrid that when I used to breed rats, snuck into my rat breeding operation, and it's a gopher snake. Somehow broke into my rodent building, and I found it in a rodent tub, but it broke into a tub with, this is a tiny gopher snake, broke into a tub with all retired breeder males. And
Oh.
so, yeah, so all the rats were at the very back, and this snake was just chilling at the front, had a bunch of little bite marks on him, like he tried to get a little froggy with some of the rats. But yeah, I still have him. It's been like a year, but that's the only colubrid I have, just because he found his way into my rodent building. But yeah, other than that, all pretty much pythons and boas.
That's pretty cool.
Where are the Amazon tree boas at, bro?
They are in my other building. We are currently in my baby building.
Wait, my bad. You said never mind. I fucked that up. Just kidding.
Sorry, but yeah, I have a baby building, which is what we're in right now, and I have an adult building and breeder building. The main difference is I run that other building really humid, like ambient 70% humidity in the building, and then I run ambient heat and or cooling as well. So I don't run any heat tape, any hot spots at all of any kind over here. I'm a little paranoid about running heat tape. So I've been in the reptile hobby since I was a kid. I've kind of come in and out a couple times. In my early 20s, I sold off my whole collection to try to pursue a music endeavor. So I was playing drums in metal bands for like the past decade, and when COVID happened, that's when I started up snakes again, because I thought that the music thing was over, didn't know when, and I was like, hey, I told my wife, like, hey, I think I might get one snake. And at that time, she knew me as a musician. She didn't know me as this reptile freak, and so kind of laid it on her heavy. After the first year, I was probably 20 snakes deep. Just kind of fell right back into where I was before, where I had a pretty big collection, like back in like the early 2010 to 2014 or so. Kept scrub pythons, all that kind of stuff. I was doing a ton of field herping, but yeah, sold off the reptile dream to go try to be a rock star. We all know how that kind of journey goes, but yeah. So now I'm heavily back into carpets and snakes and trying to really push it as far as I can now.
Nice. Okay. So, I mean, you kind of answered my questions, but I'll just ask them anyway so I can get better clarification. So, have you always been into carpets and or arboreal species?
Yeah. So, my very first snake when I was probably like, I think I was around, maybe 5th grade, was an Amazon tree boa. And it was just because that was a cheap snake at the pet store that my mom was cool with me getting, and so it kind of started there. And I think second snake was a carpet python, and so I had snakes all through like middle school and high school, and had monitors back then. The kind of Noah's Ark syndrome where you have like one of everything.
Yeah.
I was one of those guys when I was like one of 2 people, like me and one other kid in school had like reptile rooms in their house, and we were pretty close friends. But yeah, I always wanted to breed, but didn't actually accomplish it when I was younger. And when I got back into it after COVID, I was like, breeding is going to be my jam. And so that's been my focus.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, then that kind of leads me to my next thing. How did you find carpets, or how did you find or settle down and like find your passion and love for carpet pythons? And if it's not just carpet pythons and it's arboreal species, like how did that come about? Because you have people that are into like boas and the big red tails, and you got us with the retics, and then it's like, but we all had our own path of getting there. So how did you get into yours?
Yeah. So, I like I said, I started with the Amazon tree boa and everything, and then I got to know that other kid at my school that had a white lip python, and that was the snake that really just ignited the passion for me. I loved the Amazon tree boa and everything, but just the body structure and everything of that white lip python changed everything for me. And I was a young kid getting bit by an adult white-lip python every time I held it. Basically, this snake would give you about 10 minutes, and then it would just light you up real quick when it was done. And so I kind of got over a lot of that fear of the arboreal snakes after getting tagged so many times by a big snake. Not that I like to get bit by snakes, I really don't at all, but it took the fear away of realizing like, okay, the bitey stuff that everyone warns you about is really not that bad. And I ended up getting a carpet python at a reptile show, and that introduced me a little bit more to the Morelia genus. And I started getting kind of fascinated with Morelia in general. And at the time, scrub pythons were in Morelia. And so I grew up in Oregon, but I moved to Arizona. And when I got here, I was building my own cages, and I would kind of like sell a cage when I would build a new one. And there was a time where I was selling a cage, and a guy on Craigslist was like, "Hey, I'll trade you a scrub python for your cage." And I didn't know a lot about them. I had seen pictures. I didn't know how big they got or really their reputation. And so I looked up the price on King Snake and kind of saw that what they were going for, and it was about what I wanted for the cage. So I was like, even if I don't like this snake, I'll sell it, and that's kind of the same amount of money. Cool. So I go to this guy's apartment, and this was I'm not exaggerating, it was over a 10-foot long southern scrub python that he had that he had in a 40-gallon breeder. Like, this snake was coiled up in a ball that almost touched the lid.
Yeah.
Like, and I got in there, and the snake's face was just bloody from striking at the lid, and it was like that screen top, and so it was just rubbing its face raw. Super aggressive, crazy snake. I saw that, and I was like, man, give me this snake and let me get it out of here, because this I'm just getting frustrated standing here watching this. I'm gonna go give this snake a better life. Squeezed it into a box that it broke out of in my car on the drive home, because I didn't know how big this snake was. And so I brought a cardboard box that was like that big, and this snake busted out the side when I was driving down the road. I'm emergency pulling over. Got the snake back, and I actually have photos of this snake still. It was kind of the thing that really started my journey with scrub pythons, and ignited the passion, really. So I get home, and this is in the time of Morelia Python forums. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Back in the day, there used to be Morelia Python forums, and that's where like all the top dogs would go and post about their snakes, their breeding season, crazy stuff they were doing. And I just lurked on there all the time. And my first post was me with this snake that was just in bad shape. And I was like, I got this snake from someone who didn't know what they were doing. I don't really know what I'm doing. Can someone help me out? Like, any tips for work? Because this snake was really aggressive. Defensive, whatever word you like to use. This snake wanted to bite. But a local guy, he wasn't totally local, a guy who lived in Sierra Vista named Evan Arambul. He currently goes by Dr. Arroyo on Instagram. He's like my mentor in the hobby. He is one of the nicest, greatest guys I've ever met. Love the dude to death. He's at the time he had just bought out David Prada and David Mean's scrub collection, and he was like, come down to my place. You can help me work with the scrubs. You can stay down here for like a week or two. I'll just kind of show you what I do and just show you my badass collection of scrubs. And then he took me herping, but that dude kind of took me under his wing and showed me a bunch of just useful ways to keep scrubs, how to work them, and how to do it safely. He had some seriously huge snakes at his place. And so going there and seeing that really made me, when it comes to arboreal snakes, just be like, this is it for me. Like these are the cool, seeing a scrub that was like, this snake was probably about 15 feet. One of the biggest scrubs definitely the biggest scrub I've ever seen in person, like huge, but its head was like the size of a slice of pizza. And it just had these marbles for eyes, and his name is Rain. If you've ever listened to Stephen Cush talk about some of the scrubs he's got, he has Rain blood in his collection because David Means bred Rain when he had him before selling it to Evan. So Stephen Cush has a lot of Rain blood in his collection, and that snake Rain was one of the coolest snakes I've ever seen in general. He was really a beautiful snake. But yeah, it just really being there, seeing a guy who Evan goes herping in Australia, like Costa Rica. He goes all over the world looking for, and he's an amazing photographer. Like he is true snake nerd. Before I met Evan, I was like, yo, I love snakes. And then I moved in with him, where I brought my collection down to live with him in Sierra Vista, and it was us two in a 2-bedroom apartment where the 2 bedrooms were full of snakes, and we slept on the floor and the couch in the living room. And like and we woke up to go herping every morning at like 4 a.m. And even got lost in the mountains one time and had to get life flighted out. Like, so I've been through like really a lot of interesting, fun things with because of the reptiles. And thankfully it's because I've met someone like Evan, and He just kind of showed me what a true reptile nerd really lives like.
Yeah.
And really how extensive it can be. Introduced me to cool people. I got to go herping with a lot of really like awesome guys I never would have met. A pro skater went out herping with us because he saw us posting about Will or Die, and he gave me a bunch of free skate gear to go show him where Will or Die were. So just a bunch of really cool stuff has happened
Hey,
because of
hey,
snakes.
hold on, hold on. We can bribe people into showing us stuff now. That's how this works.
Dude,
Yeah.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
What the?
The
Ain't nobody
barter
told me about that.
barter system is strong in reptile people.
Yeah, I know in
Yeah.
like the hobby, but like herping, bro. If I'm trying to find something, I gotta
Yeah,
pay someone off.
may,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean that's definitely a way we
Prices
can
may
do it.
vary.
And also just like becoming
Haha.
someone who is trustworthy, that's not going to go posting the location online, so it goes and gets ripped up by people from out of state that are going to go and uh take all the snakes and go sell them at a show where they can, and you know, all that biz.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been around long enough to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I basically had to sign an NDA when I went to a couple of the herping spots I went to with Garrett and the guy that showed us around. I was like, I can't talk about where we went, but it was fun.
Okay.
They take it very seriously. Like I
Yeah.
don't take herping that seriously. I'm not like a great herper. Every cool snake I ever found was because Evan told me where to go walking. And so I can't take too much credit. Like I found a ton of really cool stuff, but it's because Evan drove me there and walked me to the spot and said, look around in this type of habitat, and I would come across stuff. So I'm not like a great herper. I don't know all the spots, but if you take me to the spot, I can spend some time looking under rocks and stuff.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
yeah. I mean, I've had a couple of OGs show me the ropes, and it's really you need to pick their brains to figure it all out and earn that trust and do all the stuff. But hold on, we'll pick up on herping because that's going to be a critical part of this conversation. But there is just kind of kick off the meat and potatoes of it. So backstage, we were talking about sizes, right? We'll get into like the in depths of sizes, but this is kind of like a beginning phase of it. So how big are your scrubs? The ones that you currently have?
I mean, I've got them. I'm assuming you're talking about adults.
Yeah.
So my female barneck that I bred is not 10 feet. She might be 9 feet,
Okay.
maybe, and at her thickest point of her body is not even as big around as a soda can.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah.
the pretense, sorry, so the crowd understands. We were having that conversation of carpets versus super doors, and there's some size comparison, right? If you keep that, would you be with the scrub in mind, right? Keep your female in mind. I have a male 2 enclosures over that's probably smaller than she is. And I believe Lee has a female that's either smaller or just about the same size. With that in mind, would you be interested in potentially getting into super dwarfs in the future if that's what you knew you were getting into?
It's not so much of that. It's just that in my adult building is floor to ceiling filled with cages on every available wall. And I really have to be particular about what I bring in here, or in there.
Okay.
Just because my Apodora are probably my number one focus in my collection right now. And those are two snakes that take 8 by 3 by 18 cages. And then right next to them are my two breeder female scrubs, which are in same size cage but 6 feet. And then
Okay.
above those are all 4 and 3 foot cages. They're all animal plastics with like shelves in them, but they literally go to 8 inches from the ceiling. And then so something that I like in my room is I like to have racks below my waist and cages above my waist. So on one wall, I've got all the CB70s are underneath all those big scrub cages, and then those are on top. And then on the other wall, I've got a big Freedom Breeder rack, and then I've got the large Cambro arboreal tubs for all my arboreal stuff, and a couple more animal plastics cages. But anyways, all of my cage space is filled with scrub pythons and apodora, and so I am far too passionate about those animals and feel like I can make a much bigger impact in a community like that than trying to step into a community where you already have a lot of substantial breeders. Like you guys have there's no shortage, I feel like, of guys that are breeding retics at a pretty high level.
Uh,
I mean, if in comparison to scrub pythons.
I mean, it depends. So it's like, I think the thing about retics is it's a very complicated and layered market. So it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about like super dwarf and dwarf reticulated pythons, like keeping them smaller and that being the goal, and like companies based around that or even breeders around that, it's actually very small. It's a very, very small. And as far as big people or like mass producers of something like that, there's only one.
Okay. I guess I feel like you walk around a show, a reptile show, the amount of captive born and bred retics you will see versus captive born and bred scrub pythons, or even in my case carpet pythons. I mean, Bill and Levi, you guys have seen my table. I'm like one of the only guys that's got carpet pythons usually at the shows. Like and that's not even a rare snake.
Yeah.
There's just I feel like maybe it's the artist side of me because I'm a musician. Like I want to be unique in a way, and I want to stand out, and that's honestly a reason why I don't do a lot of jungle carpet pythons, is because I can name you 10 dudes that produce the most screaming yellow and black jungle carpet pythons. When I came back in after COVID and started building my collection, I was like, why would anyone buy a jungle from me when they could buy one from Andrew Paris or Nick Mutton or Scott Borden, or like why am I trying to chase? And there's plenty of those snakes out there. What I wasn't seeing was people specializing in Darwin carpets. And so I kind of went that direction when it came to like a pure locality carpet, because there's also a fair amount of dudes that are specializing in like the IJ or the West Popwin carpet. So you've got these guys that are focused in their lane, and I just wanted to find a lane of my own that there wasn't a lot of other people in. I bought some unique animals that very few people have for that Darwin project. And it made it so I could stand out and people noticed me much quicker. Not that that's important, but if you ever want to sell snakes, people got to be able to notice you. And I feel like it was going to be hard for me to be noticed in jungle carpet pythons. Just like I feel like it would be hard for me to be noticed in retics. And retics are not necessarily a snake that I have the space to, if I do produce. I mean, average super dwarf clutch, how many eggs is that?
Depends on the locality, but I think like the biggest clutch I've heard of is maybe 18 to 20 eggs, maybe, but that's a pretty abnormally large clutch. But again, depends on localities. I would say safely somewhere around 12 to 15 is probably what you should be expecting. But yeah, that's probably about what you should expect.
Yeah, so that's a fair amount of snakes to be holding back of, that if people don't want to buy from me, and because there's also you guys to get those snakes from that are a little more well known and well versed and can tell you a lot more about the history of those snakes. So I guess for me, that it's little things like that that keep me from getting retics, is because I feel like um, I'm not into them enough to be able to stand out in that sector of the hobby.
Hey, that's a great mentality to have, man. I'm not gonna knock it or debate that. That's fair, and I feel like there's a place for what you're doing, for sure.
On average, how many eggs do your carpets lay?
I average 12 eggs.
Okay, so
Yeah, and
kind
so
of right in that same ballpark.
my biggest clutches are usually 16 to 18. My smallest are usually around 10, but on average,
Okay.
I'd say about 12 to 13.
Okay, yeah, my first year, my girl, I think she laid 15. I
Okay.
think maybe it was 12. I think it was either 12 and then 15 the next year, and I think she maxed out at like 18.
Okay.
I was just really good at getting her to be fertile and having good turnout of eggs. But yeah, but she wasn't a pure super dwarf. She was a high percentage, and she was still very small. I think she was only 8.5 feet, maybe.
Okay.
And she was producing quite a bit.
So on those types of animals that are maxing out or not maxing out, being those smaller breeders, what type of feeding regimen do you run with those types of animals?
It's a little controversial in retics, but for me, it's when you're breeding them, they're cycling based off of food. So you use food to cycle them. So food's very important with retics. But for me, once I get a female up to about what I think once she gets up to the size and she's starting to create that body shape that we want, because a fat retic has got fertility problems. So you want to keep them kind of lean, but you have to ride a line. You have to also have enough fat on them that they can withstand creating and doing the stuff that they need to do to make the eggs.
Right.
But once they kind of get to that body shape, so I'm probably feeding them every 10 days up until they're at that body shape, and then I'll stretch it out to maybe, depending on the size of the snake and the localities and percentages, they're probably eating every 2 weeks to once a month. Again, depending on what I'm working with, but I would say every 2 weeks is what I'm doing right now. And then when I'm ready to breed, I up the food size, and then I feed them every week. And then as far as food size goes, my retic, the 6.5 footer, she's on large or jumbo rats right now, is what I feed her every 2 weeks. But I like to feed my retics pretty substantially large meals. And if I could feed them larger meals and kind of stretch it out to 10 days or 2 weeks, that's kind of better for me. But I do feed my younger ones about every week.
Okay. I mean, a lot of that is pretty similar to how you would do a carpet python, especially with that max size. My biggest females are eating jumbo rats, and that looks pretty big in their stomach.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a girl that just laid a 14 egg clutch that has never even eaten a large rat.
Yeah.
So she'll sometimes I'll feed a small or a medium and a small or something like that. I kind of feed a little more based on body condition than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So because I definitely do summer fast for pretty much everything in my room, and that helps in particular with the endo stuff like the scrubs and the apodora.
Makes sense.
So
they're in the same area.
Yeah, and so I just do it with everything, where pretty much June, July, August, my snakes will be lucky to get a meal. When I'm checking everyone, that's where if anyone looks significantly thin, that's where I'll be like, okay, you're metabolizing your food, or your fat store is faster than the other guy. So I feed based on that. But fasting is it's really good for humans. Like it's good for,
Yeah.
I assume, animals, especially animals that go through a type of um, food period where we know that mammals are not around as prevalent as or at all times a year. And
Yeah.
so there's going to be an influx in food, and I try to do a kind of like boom and bust, feast and famine mentality with the snakes. So um, but I do it with the babies too. And I basically take summer off. The fall is where everyone starts eating pretty heavy. Um, the Indonesian stuff, I feed all the way through the cooling period. I don't get super cool in my room. I might go down to about 70, but I found I had the best luck getting my Apodora and my scrubs to ovulate if I during the breeding season. So I guess to break it down, I'll feed like September, October, November really hard for
Hmm.
everybody. And
Yeah.
then at December is pretty much where it starts getting cool here. So the room will start cooling there. I'll cut the carpets off of their food. But the Indonesian stuff, I will continue to do weekly meals, kind of small meals through that cooling period. And in between, I'll feed, and then I'll reintroduce the male like 2 days later, and I'll let them breed, and then I will pull him, feed both of the snakes, and then reintroduce. And I basically do that until the female refuses food, and then she'll ovulate, and then
Hmm.
I'll get my prelay sheds, um, and then hopefully it goes good. Um, but that's like a few months right there that the carpets get no food, but the Indonesian stuff kind of didn't get a break. And so
Yeah.
that's where their break comes in on the feeding during the summer. And I found I can just get the food and the weight back on carpets after the breeding season within my springtime. And so they've got like a couple months to eat and get back to normal, and then I kind of let
Yeah.
them chill. So that's how I feed, because I think in my experience, it leans into their cycles better, as like an additional cycle, not just temperature cycling. I'm also food cycling, so it's like I like having two triggers. And I feel like
Yeah.
the long summer fast gives me, for what I do, the best results. I don't know how retic guys do it, but that's essentially my formula.
What about the
Yeah. I mean,
hatchlings?
Hatchlings, I think you can feed them as much as you possibly can. I I have never seen an obese or overweight hatchling carpet. I found that when they're in that first year, first 18 months, you feed them and they just get long and long and long, and they grow and they grow. I've actually tested it out on a few snakes where I tried to power feed, I guess is what you would say, and they turned out great. But it's because when they got to breeding age, and also they got those fast during the year, it's like impossible for them to get overweight, if you allow them to fast. And I found they actually do a lot of growing in that fast too. They'll go through a shed cycle during that period of not eating. But yeah, I think my ideal feeding for like a hatchling is every 5 to 7 days. Sometimes it'll be every 10 days. Um, but yeah, I try to hit them hard in the beginning, because I feel like if you don't, they kind of lose. If you take too much time in between those early meals, it almost feels like you kind of have to get them going again, and you gotta tease feed them or get the meal super hot or whatever it might be. If you kind of like get them eating their first meal and then you take 2 weeks, 3 weeks off, that next time it's not familiar enough to them where it kind of feels like a new event is happening, in my experience anyway. I feel like if you get that first meal in them, hit them again in like 4 to 5 days, and then they start, every time you open that tub, their head is looking up and they're kind of expecting it. And I want them to be at that point where every time I'm sliding the tub open, they're looking up at me, waiting for that meal, and that's when I know a snake's pretty much eating well.
So let's talk about that meal a little bit.
Okay.
So when I picked up my two from you, I was blown away that you told me to put them on mice because we put our retics on rats. And then I'm come to find out, I bought a couple since then, and I come to find out that's exactly what they're doing too. Mice, mice, mice. And we're talking the last two I got are yearlings.
So there's a little bit of a thought process behind the small, like let's say a pinky rat, and even pinky mice, is they don't have those dense bones yet. They're kind of squishy, and for me, I don't like that their poops are all nasty when you feed them a pinky rat. It's like more of a runny poop. When you give them a mouse that of an equivalent size that has like hardened bones and it's got hair on it, I feel like that roughage is good for their digestive system to kind of clump the poop and make it a more pleasant cleaning experience for me, and I'm not having to scrub the sides of the tubs when I'm cleaning babies. That, and also so this is something that I've kind of thought a little bit about, and I'm not too sure if there's any science behind it, but a lot of people talk about like, well, the pinky rat is filled with mom's milk, and snakes don't eat milk. And so that's why people with some species say it could cause prolapses, because they're trying to digest something that isn't really suited for their stomach. I would say, to play devil's advocate to that, mother's milk is like one of the most nutritious things in the world. Like the milk that comes from a rat. I mean, bodybuilders try to get breast milk because it's super like dense in nutrition. So I just kind of wonder sometimes, maybe that is a little beneficial. Maybe it's not actually bad because some of those nutrients have to be good for the snake too. If they're getting some of that highly nutritious milk from the mom through the pinky rat. I don't know. I've just thought about that. I've never heard anyone talk about that before. I've just heard people say snakes don't eat milk, so all the milk inside of the pinky rat is not necessarily an ideal prey item. But what's inside of the mouse and what's inside of every other rat? It's lab block is what we feed our rodents, which is not, I mean, if you feed your dogs kibble, like it's essentially the same thing. And so we're not giving our rats like super nutritious diets. We're giving them a kibble diet because that's what's easy. So that's just I don't know if the mouse is actually better or not. I just know that
it's throughout carpets, though, from what I'm finding out, that you guys, it's not just something you're doing.
Yeah, and that's because, like I said, like carpet guys are kind of their own little niche in the hobby, where we kind of go by it's a pretty small community of guys that honestly all have had the Morelia Python radio, and like there's been carpet python podcasts going around. Yeah, hell yeah to those guys. There's been carpet python podcasts going around longer than any other snake podcast. And so we have all been listening to each other talk for the past 20 years and all kind of hearing people discuss like, oh, well, I did Bill, you got snakes from Phil Starkey, right? In Germany.
Yes.
So snakes from him.
They're coming this May. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw a thread back in the day of him and another breeder just talking about how they did a trial where they had like a whole clutch of snakes that they split in half or something like that and fed one control group mice, one control group rats, and they just determined the growth rate and how everything looked in their feeding response. I remember seeing Phil say, I like the way the mice go, and so I'm going to go with mice. And so, um, I'm sure I'm not the only guy who was sitting there like, oh, these two big name breeders just did a whole trial on feeding pinky rats versus like hopper mice, and they all say they prefer the hopper. And so, um, it being such a small community of guys it's spread pretty quickly through amongst us just to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that because honestly, they're cheaper too, which is nice. And the only thing I think you'll run into is mouser carpets where they don't want to get off mice. I honestly have one snake that will not eat a rat. It will eat mice, ASFs, and chicks. It will not eat a rat, and it's a jungle carpet, female that is way past the age of being able to breed, but I just can't get enough size on her to breed, because she only wants to eat mice. So there is that. So what I would recommend is feed them mice until they get to a prey item of a rat that is actually crawling around and has some hair on it, like rat pups. They're not the most, like, they're still kind of nursing, but they're crawling around and they've got hair and everything. So I would recommend feeding mice until you can do at least rat pups. Or for me, I do a huge jump usually when I go from mice to rats, and I'll go from jumbo mice to small rats. And that jump right there will get a lot of carpets like kind of kicked into gear, and that's like the start of them getting into their adulthood and me working them towards like being a breeder for me. But the first time they eat a small rat, it's like, ooh, I hope that doesn't come back up. But carpet pythons have a tremendous ability to take a huge meal, just like a retic. They can hold down some pretty crazy meals. There's been times where I'm like, I'm gonna see that rat tomorrow, and come in, the bump's smaller, and 3 days later, there's nothing there. Not that I do that every time, but I have done that in the past. Now I try to avoid any extremes, to be honest. Like, I don't get my room too cold. I don't get anything too hot. I don't feed too much. Try not to feed too little. I just try to kind of keep everything chugging at a medium pace.
I think the reason that we don't, and you touched on this, the reason that the retic community doesn't use mice very often, if ever, they're not on them very long. You know, the carpet python's a slower growing snake, and we don't want to have to go through that Mouser syndrome and get them off those, in months. You know what I mean? So we just keep them on rats until they just progress up in sizes.
I don't think I've ever heard of Mauser syndrome and retics, and even people that have tried it. Their food motivation is insane.
They
They'll
fucking
eat.
eat everything.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll eat
I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine.
They'll eat a freaking dog if they had the option to, and they're hungry. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when they get on those mice, they really get addicted to them. I mean, they really want the mouse.
It's weird.
That
Carpets are very much like that.
hasn't been my experience with when I was raising babies and I was hatching babies. I would start them out on like mouse hoppers and stuff like that, but they would take anything. I could go mouse hopper, pinky rat, mouse hopper, pinky rat. I could go hopper, and then throw a rat. Like, they just ate everything.
Yeah.
Your carpets ate rats for me, TJ.
Did they?
Frozen thawed.
Hell yeah. See, I feel like they don't actually end up being that picky. I think there's particular snakes, just like anything, that, like, I've got certain snakes that want the rodent to be held at a certain direction, or they just keep looking at it weird. So there's just some snakes that have preferences, and it's been a common thing. And I guess you don't hear about it too much anymore, but in old school jungle carpet python lineages, you used to hear about animals getting stuck on mice forever. But honestly, it's probably not that big of a deal. And I think that if you just did multiple prey items, you could probably have a female breed just on mice, especially if she was like 7 or 8 years old and plenty old enough to breed and carry a clutch and everything. Even if she's on the smaller side, I think you could make it work.
Yeah.
That's cool. Hold on. I want to address this question in the chat real quick before I forget about it. Todd said, how many breeder animals do you have and how many babies do you produce per year on average?
So if we're talking females, I've probably got 7 or 8 adult like proven breeder adult carpets. But in 2023, I produced a bunch of babies that I made to be like holdbacks of like, these are going to be my double and triple recessive type of projects going forward. And all of those are going to be trying to breed for me in 2027. So next year, a lot of them are getting pretty close. So I'm going to add about 10 more carpets to that lineup. And then the year after, I've probably got another 10. I started out with like kind of a small number of adults that I got from a local guy. And that's why I was willing to kind of take the gamble on some adult snakes, is because they were from a guy who was local. And so it wasn't like I was shipping them across the country or anything. So I basically took all those snakes in the first couple of years. I held back almost everything I produced. And that way I can have a pretty substantial collection going forward. Of all stuff that hatched out here. But for scrub pythons, I have 2 breeder females. Fingers crossed that second one is going to drop a clutch here pretty soon. And the other one is already proven. But I've also got like 2 pairs of emerald tree boas. I've got 2.1 of chondros. So I've got of breeder animals around here of like breeding age and everything. I probably, as far as females, it's probably close to about 20. But that number is going to go up quite a bit in the next year or two. As far as right now, every year I produce about 40 to 70 babies. And that's usually just like 4 to 6 clutches.
Okay.
Not bad, not bad.
Cool.
And then
now, sorry.
I was gonna say, but this year I'm expecting a boa litter. I'm producing my first boa morphs. So that'll be, she ovulated. She's contorting and laying all uncomfortable right now. So I think I'm still another like month and a half out. But it's a ghost leopard female that's pos het call. So she's a hypo anery type 1 leopard, 50% pos het call, and bred. She's from Starlight Boas in Germany, and I bred her to a triple het leopard anery type 1 call male produced by Chaz at Low Key Boas. But very excited about that boa pairing. Never done boa, so I'm excited for the live birth.
What other carpets you got coming down the pipe?
So this year I did the clutch I already have are gammas. I did gamma to gamma jag, and then I've got my Exanthic zebra het granite male was bred to a caramel and a caramel jag het Exanthic. And then I bred a hypo to a zebra. So I'm hoping for some hypo zebras. I haven't produced any of those yet. And then hopefully some Darwin carpets as well. Another repeat pairing I've done before. But I'm doing a few repeat pairings this year because last year I produced some really cool stuff that I held on to. And I want to produce some more of those that I can let go, because I have a couple people that are just begging me for a few of the animals that I don't want to let go. Every time I post them, they're like, just tell me how much already. And I might end up just keeping them. So if I can produce some more, I would be happy to sell the other ones. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my pairings are crosses and morphs and mutts, and so when you do pairings like that, especially like very selectively bred stuff for color and pattern, it's not. I guess the thing about carpet pythons that's different than, um, let's just say, the ball python market. I found in general the ball python market just wants the gene. They don't necessarily look for the best example of the gene. In carpets, you get a lot of people trying to refine genes. It's not about just stacking it; it's making the best looking exanthic zebra, or just the best looking zebra. Instead, it's not all about stacking, but once you start stacking the genes, a lot of people in carpets really refine them, and you end up with some really wild, selectively bred stuff. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Nick Mutton's ivory carpets, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a jungle carpet. 20 years ago, it was just a jungle carpet, but he's slowly picked out the whitest of the white over the years, and ended up with the black and white jungle. Um, there's not a lot of people in other communities. Granted, I'd say it's a similar thing as Ed Marino with Emerald Tree Boas, with his trying to plug the white in there. He has the whitest Emerald Tree Boas anyone has ever seen. People do that in carpet pythons a lot too, where they just try to selectively breed for a look, or just a stripe, and they refine the stripe, or they make the caramel the best caramel they could possibly make. So yeah, that's something that I'm doing with the combos, is just trying to not just make an exanthic zebra, hold back the best one and raise that up, and see how good I can possibly make an exanthic zebra, or whatever insert morph name there. But yeah.
Everybody who's seen that exanthic zebra I got off you, that girl has just been blown away. Every time I open that tub, my eyes just pop out. Can't believe how beautiful that snake, man.
There's something about that morph combo, man. Like, the dad of that one is an exanthic zebra het granite, one of the nicest I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of people post up their exanthic zebras online, and I'm just like, man, I don't know how I got so lucky with my male, because I mean, it's because Vito, the guy I got a lot of my stuff from, he was selectively buying the best looking morphs he could. Wasn't just picking up an exanthic carpet. It was the whitest he could possibly find, which a lot of it came from Germany. And so, yeah, that's a lot of my stock.
Yeah, we see some of that in Retics. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say the most common thing to see, but you've got people that line breed certain things. And I mean, I think at the top of the chain, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, Aubrey Pruitt with the Ocelots, he's not just stacking, he chooses the best examples to keep continuing his line.
Yeah, like what he did is he like produced, confirmed, got ocelots, and then what he did was just like, I mean, there was a couple where this doesn't completely apply, but basically he was adding just one gene at a time to ocelot, see what it did. Like he put like Motley, or I don't think he put Motley, but he put like Phantom to ocelot. What does that do? All right, Marble to ocelot. What does that do? Sunfire to ocelot. What does that do? Tiger to ocelot. And then you kind of see what they're doing. Then you can start going, okay, well, maybe if I mix this one, and put ocelot on there, that'll make something kind of crazy, and you can refine it, or maybe even make it more predictable and stuff like that. But like little ocelot stuff is so new. Stacking it with multiple genes is always going to be on the cutting edge.
Right.
But there's like other genes too. Like anery is one where people take it and perfect it because it's like the black and silver. That's what you're making with it, and you're trying to perfect that, and then you can add some enhancers to it, like Sunfire or Platinum. That'll change the pattern, but also intensify the colors and stuff. So there are a lot of people like me and some other are snow people, and they just really focus on snow, which is a double recessive, and they just make snow shit and make it really, really good and make it better and better every year.
There's Jay popping off at the Marvel Sun
There.
Ocelot.
I knew if I started saying that, it was going to come through. The Kraken.
Yeah,
Kraken.
that's a hell of a combo right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some people, but then you got people that made Retics really popular and stuff like Jay Brewer, who just were like, put fucking every morph we can get our hands on, put them together and stack them. And sometimes it works out, and then sometimes they just make kind of lame looking or blurred out animals. But I would say, even stacking a whole bunch of stuff, like with Retics, the uniqueness, like they don't really blur out. They always kind of make something kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think Retics probably have the most striking and extreme morphs, and I'd say definitely in Pythons. Like ball python morphs, I don't think really compare to what Retic morphs do. You just don't get that same. I mean, there's beautiful ball python morphs, I'd say carpets are close, but you don't get quite as extreme. Some of the stuff you see in Retics, I mean, I'm terrible with names, but the morphs are beautiful. They're insane.
Mm-hmm.
They express, I think, the widest palette of colors. With carpet pythons, just don't have that many colors to choose from. Jay Poor. And I mean, I'm not against making morphs. I like making morphs. But as long as it's a good looking morph. And I think that I think the Retic guys definitely have good looking morphs that even when you do start making these stacks, you're not sacrificing like all these years and countless het animals that just kind of get sold off as whatevers. There's a pretty good payoff at the end for Retics. And I think it's been pretty consistent. But I think the same thing is there with carpets. It's not quite as extreme with colors. We don't have like that pied look. Like we don't have not yet. It'll happen eventually. But the thing that carpet python guys and Retic guys, I think, kind of have an appreciation for is the wild type look. There are guys in Retics that are just doing the wild type, and I think that's kind of what makes those two sectors of the hobby stand out from, let's say, the majority of boa and ball python guys. I know there's boa guys like Vin Russo that and Jeff, I think it's Jeff Murray, that do no more. They're not doing a lot of morphs. They're doing wild type stuff. But in general, a lot of the wild type locality animals are just gone from the hobby in those cases. Carpet guys, we have a closed gene pool, yes, but dudes have been good about keeping particular lines pure for like Brettles for 30 years or whatever it's been. And there's guys in the Retic community that are trying their best. But it's kind of similar like with scrub pythons. You're going off collection data, which is not the most reliable source. And so
Can you say that again louder for the people in the back?
collection data is not the most reliable source. As someone who is very interested in wild caught snakes from Indonesia, I think it's a very established thing in the scrub sector of the community of like, you're kind of taking somebody's word, but we have a general consensus of over the past 20 years, all the snakes that have come from Merauke locality when it comes to a scrub python, we're pretty sure these are all coming from the same area. Even if it might not be in Merauke, let's call it southern. And then we have a pretty good idea of where the other looks are coming from. But me breeding barnecks and other people that have bred barnecks, man, there's some stuff that popped out that I would have called a Maniquari type if it was an import. And then other ones where I'd be like, that's a sarong. And so the variability that a lot of these snakes throw might make it look like a certain look we're getting in the hobby is coming from its own place, but it's just like the one it we just didn't find its clutch mates that look standard to where that location is, if that makes sense. Um,
No, it makes
Yeah, it makes
perfect
sense.
sense.
It
yeah,
makes sense.
because there's look in scrub pythons that's like a reduced patternish type of bar neck that people were calling maniquaries for a long time. And I've seen people produce animals that look very similar to that from just your standard bar neck pairings. But if that came in on a wild caught shipment, it would have been called a different locality. And so it's so hard to narrow all this stuff down. And I think that's why I try not to get too technical with it, because we don't, until we actually know, everyone's just kind of taking someone else's word on in a crazy game of telephone. And these snakes show up in these villages from people that collect them from all over the place. And they will, in order to make their way to, let's say we're talking about Indonesia, if you're collecting scrub pythons and taking them to Jayapura or whatever it is, that's just the shipping port that they're going to come out of, and that's going to be where that exporter lives. That doesn't mean the snakes were collected there. He could have had people going all over the place and go to other villages and find snakes. And so it's just a lot of that stuff is just the shipping port where they came out of, even though it's not going to be the actual location of the animal.
Scrubs sound a hell of a lot cooler than Retics.
No.
I gotta
I'll say
tell
what I
you,
said.
I love the carpets. I got the bug bad.
They're a cool snake, and they're what's cool about the carpet pythons is there's still nobody producing those just the triple recessive, the snows. There's been like maybe one or two snows hatched out in this country, which is just an exanthic albino. Both of those genes have been in the country for a very long time. I know
Wow.
Todd Dyer from Psychotic Exotics produced a snow zebra in 2019. And I haven't seen anyone else here produce them since. And it's because there was even the carpet python community is divided into two sectors, really, of people that kind of want to keep lines pure and not cross subspecies, and then there's people that are okay with it and crossing the subspecies to make morph combos. I sit
Real quick.
Yeah.
You're into it and stuff. The people that want to keep them pure, and I kind of have this swirling and this argument that kind of goes around with the retic, when the locality retics in particular. We have a different kind of argument on our side, but with you guys trying to keep them pure, like we only have so many, like the animals that we have is what we have. If you keep keeping them pure, at some point, aren't you going to bottleneck the genetics and like not have them anymore? Like, aren't you going to get to a point where you're going to have to, like, just so you can have these kind of snakes, you're going to have to fucking cross them to, outcross them, outbreed them, bring in new blood, mix bloods and stuff like that? I feel like it's kind of inevitable, especially for you guys, because it's Australian species mostly.
I am 100% in that mindset it's something that not a lot of people want to address. A lot of people, because some of the most popular people in carpet pythons and the most well-known guys and the most respected are guys that do not cross things. They keep lines pure. Therefore, they're doing a lot of inbreeding, like you're saying. That doesn't get talked about a lot because I think we haven't experienced the bottleneck of genetics. The few times we have experienced that genetic bottleneck came when there was a morph involved. So to give a little backstory on the granite gene in carpet pythons, the granite gene comes from the West Papuan carpet or IJ carpets, and granite came up in a small breeder's collection in the Netherlands, I think. And he just popped out this crazy snake, kept breeding it back, and did a lot of inbreeding, produced a lot. By the time guys in this country found out about it, they hit him up and they're like, "Yo, we'll buy off the whole thing. We'll buy the whole project from you." And so I think it was guys like Nick and maybe a couple other dudes bought this collection, brought it in, and couldn't get viable snakes out of these granites. The visual granites and even the hets were so inbred that they were hatching out without eyes. And the original ones weren't like that. And like the original founder animal wasn't like that. So they assumed this has got to be from inbreeding. And it took several generations of outcrossing that animal to wild caught stock before they could even get viable clutches and animals that weren't kinked up. And that's just the work that one guy in the Netherlands did to one gene. Granted, a gene was involved, and people have kind of always talked about they think granites might be weak, but I think it's because the source is very inbred. And so you take a step backwards every time you breed it back. You take a step back into having a predominantly inbred blood. And so it takes a lot of outcrossing to get those deleterious genes out of the mix. And we haven't experienced that in in guys that have been breeding jungle carpets since the 80s, or Bredli or the Brettles python. They're not experiencing that. So I think that's what keeps them from being like, hey, like when you're making morphs, it's a broken gene. And you're compounding it. That's why you're getting the issues, not because you're inbreeding it. And so it's been spoken about quite a bit, but it's not something that anyone has any concrete evidence on. So no one wants to speak really on if it's right or wrong to keep inbreeding these lines of jungles. Or, I mean, I'm sure you guys know the rough scale python, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single rough scale python we have in the country came from 5 animals. 5 animals were pulled out of Australia, out of the Kimberley, brought to America for breeding projects. And I think they come from such a, the rough scale anyways, comes from such a niche habitat over 100,000 years. They're probably all related at this point. If they come from such a small area, the odds of them not finding their clutch mate when it's breeding season is going to be kind of rare. And so they call those like island species, where animals that come from generally like an isolated, not a literal island, but like an isolated population, have probably worked out a lot of those deleterious genes. And so you probably don't have to worry about it as much from animals that come from a much more vast and intertwining habitat, where it comes into other animals essentially, where they can actually travel. So going back to me pretty much being a fence sitter on a lot of things in the hobby, is I don't know, but I definitely think about it. And it keeps me wanting to, I guess when it comes to making morphs, if I do make a big combo, I want to outcross that to a wild type that has a particular look that I'm looking for, and trying to get a little bit of that inbred blood out of it. Granted, that's making a bunch of more mutts, and that's going to frustrate all the purists. And so it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, no matter what you do. And so you just kind of got to do what jives with you and makes you stoked, is as far like that's how I'm approaching it, because so many of these things we don't have answers for, and I would hate to totally call off certain projects or like I don't know, abandon certain breeding ideas because of things we don't know.
Yeah.
Like I would like to see it through, and maybe I'll experience some of those bottlenecks in my collection, and we can learn from it. But I don't know. I've only heard of that happening with the granite gene in carpet pythons.
Yeah, when I got my 2 granites from Star, I picked out a male that I just liked, and I was talking to him. He's like, "If you want a pair," and I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I got to find you the right pair." So he got me a het granite girl to go with this one, and he told me about the whole story and told me that he picked these out specifically, that these were going to be success for me. So that was really cool. I mean, they're really good. The communication's been pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, he's the top dog, I'd say, right now, globally, as far as like where he's sending stuff to, and he's the reliable source. And he wants you to come back with and have success with those animals. So I'm glad that that more people are talking about that, and it's not a thing that's just like, hey, I got a potential sell of 2 granites, and it's because giving you a het granite is probably a cheaper animal, and so, but it's going to work out better for you in the long run, and it's good that he's looking out for you, and that's the type of guys. Ultimately, the carpet python community is not full of people trying to rip you off. It's
Yeah, I
such a
mean,
yeah.
he could have went and sold me that female that I said, "Hey, this is a great female," but he didn't. You know, he sold me a way lesser expensive snake, but he got me the right snake. So I'd concur with what you're saying about him.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, our bottleneck argument is what you already talked about. We are island species, or like our localities are island localities, and they've been there for God knows how long. So they all have to be related and all that stuff anyway. So it probably have also worked out, all those things as well.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like, I think that there's something else we're probably doing in captivity that is going to be more detrimental to the snakes than what up, Zane? Than breeding them to each other. I think we're gonna find out down the road that like maybe we should have been doing this all along, or like I don't know. We're constantly evolving as a hobby, and as a hobby, it's crazy how young and new it is. Like how there's a 70-year-old ball python right now at a zoo. You guys know about that snake? So that snake was probably brought in amongst some of the first snake keepers ever. And like there's been like one of the initial like animals that started this hobby and captive animals is still alive. And also we're trying to figure out how to achieve that longevity, because I don't know anyone who has a snake even half that age. Like I see a couple 30-year-old snakes, but I don't know. I think it's just really crazy that ball python came in 70 years ago and has continued to just chug along, probably in a rack in the back of a zoo facility somewhere. And they got it right, and they haven't killed that thing yet. It's what is it that we're doing that is making snakes only last 15 good years, maybe 20? I think there's something we're missing in our husbandry, or just I don't know. I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Has that ball python been bred?
It laid a Partho clutch after not being paired, but it was paired 15 years prior. So that snake was being paired when it was like in its 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I don't know, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I think the inbreeding bottleneck thing is something we should maybe look for, be aware of. But
yeah, I'm just curious to like what the argument is for the people that like are keeping the lines pure and stuff like that. Like, what's their argument, or what's their justification, or what do they say like to like counter people that bring up the bottleneck issue? Do they just say, well, it's never going to happen, or it hasn't happened yet, or we'll let future Joe Blow deal with that problem because right now it's not?
What I hear the most is they're like, I like the wild type. They're like, I want my grandkids to be able to see what a carpet python, like if all of the habitat in Australia that carpet pythons live in gets annihilated, they want to be able to show their grandkids what a carpet python looked like. And that they weren't all jags that were screaming neon yellow living out. So that, granted, they take a pure jungle carpet python that in the wild is not highlighter yellow and jet black. It's much closer to brown and light brown. They've turned, with selective breeding, they've turned the animal into something it is not in the wild. And so
it's like kind of counter the argument then in itself, is because you're not really keeping it.
Because the only way to do that would be to pick at random.
But also, in counter to that argument, is these morphs, or at least most of them, at least I would say, I'll say no business with most of the morphs were wild caught animals. So they are what they look like in the wild. They may not live forever like that. They may not be predominantly that way, but they're found in the wild.
Yeah, the original Darwin carpet python that was albino was caught on like a clothesline. Some lady found it and took it in. It was like, hey, this thing looks kind of weird. And that is what that snake right there gave us all of the albino carpets. And that snake, I think that there was talk of them selling for like 20 grand or something. Now you can pick up an albino carpet for $400, but it hasn't been that long. It's only been maybe like not even 20 years, probably 15 years, I think, of the albinos being like in the hobby. And they went from Australia all over Europe. South Korea's got them. America, like everywhere, has albino carpets. So it's pretty crazy to think what that one snake that was caught in the wild was able. That's probably one of the most successful snakes that was ever captured in the wild to be a breeder, is that snake right there. I forget, she has a name. She's in one of the carpet python books. Blondie, that was her name, I think.
Didn't our tiger come from, all our tigers come from one tiger, Lee?
Yeah, a lot of it.
Bob Clark brought in a tiger.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those, the albinos, the golden childs, orange ghost stripe, like a lot of those were like the pieds. A lot of those were like wild caught, like morphs like that.
Yes, so that. I mean, I get what you're saying of like, that is a wild type. Like that, they came from the wild. So you don't have to, it seems like the purists hate morphs, even though the morph came from the wild and came from the wild type. And it was something that nature was just trying to do to see if it was advantageous. And it was. Look at that snake lived because it was striking enough to the human eye to get pulled out of the wild. And I bet all of its clutch mates are dead. Snakes that were living in, not a lot of snakes make it to adulthood. They get eaten by other snakes. They get eaten by birds.
Especially in Australia, it's a rough place.
You got snakes that eat snakes out there. You've got monitor lizards. A monitor will smoke just about any snake. So yeah, if you're a morph and you get found by a human, you are the happiest snake in the world, I imagine, because you probably just got your success in life. You're going to be able to pass on your genes almost for sure. Humans are going to make sure that happens. Um, whether or not that's a good thing, I don't know. You get into the, but I don't totally hate against the idea of all that.
Yeah.
So I meant to bring this up earlier. Me and you were talking about sizes, carpets, and you mentioned like it sounds like a general consensus. You guys don't like your males to get super big, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So how do you guys do that? How do you guys keep your males from reaching a length that's not exactly optimal?
I mean, so I guess the optimal size is kind of like a loose term, because in the wild, having that big size is a necessity because they're gonna have to compete for their mate. If they find another boy out in the wild, he's gonna try to fight you. So you don't have to be that big in just because things are a certain way in the wild. I don't think it needs to be that way in captivity. For an example, I've heard this saying from Terry Phillip from the Reptile Gardens that says they've got prairie rattlesnakes in South Dakota. It snows a lot in South Dakota. Do you think I go shoveling snow into my prairie rattlesnake cages? It's like,
No.
no. So there's certain things that snakes are able to do because they need to in the wild, but it's not a necessity for them to survive. And so there is I'd say a big portion of it is carpet python keepers not wanting to have to feed a big rat. It's cheaper. Also, you don't have to keep them in as big of an enclosure, because if you're a breeder and that snake is breeding for you and that snake is in good health and that snake eats, it's just small. What is it missing? Why would its life not be as good when it's small as it is if it was a giant 10-foot male in captivity that is going to be harder for you to give it adequate space? So you can get in. Snakes will grow until they die. They don't have like a finish line of like, this is how big I get. They grow until they hit a point where they're like, yo, I'm done. So you can push that super hard, and that's not necessarily the best route to go either. So I don't know. It's the way that we do it and keep the males small is just don't feed them a lot. You're really in control of your snake's growth rate. Just like if you say people power feed to get them big, you can just moderate feed to keep them moderate. And you don't have to try to hit.
That's such a hot button thing in the retic community.
Well, the thing, so in carpet pythons, term maintenance feeding was used a lot, and because you really could get away with a lot of guys keeping their snakes just really, really thin and really small. I think that I don't think that's necessarily good either. And I think there's a limit to how small a snake should be, but I don't know what the way, I don't know the way to measure that limit of like, if a boy snake, let's say you're raising it at a average rate and it's growing totally normal, and it starts cruising the cage like it wants to breed a girl, but it's only 3.5 feet long, and that you're like, hey, let's give him a shot. You put him in there and he breeds the girl. why would you be like, okay, now we got to start getting you some medium and large rats? Like like if he already had success and he's going through the motions of being able to reproduce and he's eating, what is advantageous about getting a snake to the size that, even, I guess, what's the size that you think, Levi, is optimal when you're talking about, like, well, keeping them from optimal size? Like, what is that mark and where did you get it? So did that mark come from from Google, or did it come from like people that collect snakes in Australia, or did it come from a breeder? Did it come from multiple breeders? Like, where does that number of the size come from? Because if you're going on the max size, there's probably a 80 or 100-year-old carpet python in Australia that's 13 feet long. That doesn't mean that we can't pair our snakes until they're 13 feet long. Maybe at the way that I feed my snakes, it would become 13 feet within 100 years. So since we don't know the actual longevity of these snakes, who's to say when they're supposed to hit that size? I'm sorry, I know I can rant. But,
no, that was
you're
spot
good. You're good,
that
man.
was spot on. That was exactly what I was looking for. No, it's more of, like Lee was saying, it's a hot button with what we keep.
It's
And
because with
underfeeding and
dwarfs, you're fighting what their size is.
you're trying to keep them small by underfeeding.
That's what the accusation is.
Yeah.
But that's not the facts. The facts are they're genetically smaller because of the insular dwarfism on the islands, and we're using that to our advantage to then bring a giant snake and make it smaller. And then now we can take those giant snakes morphs and make them smaller. Because the only morph that we have in the island localities is Anery, which just happens to be my favorite morph. So if that's like all I would make is Anery pure fill in the blank, I'm happy because that is my favorite morph, and it's a locality. It'd be a very small animal very consistently.
Yeah, I guess from an outsider perspective of the reticulated python community, the gripe I hear is that people get these like mixed percentage of super dwarfs, and then they're underfeeding them while they have them before they sell them to the customer. And I think that is you probably have a clash of people thinking that's the same thing as having an actual pure super dwarf, and you've got people, because I mean, if we're gonna get into that from an outsider's perspective, looking at the whole, like, well, this is a 50% this super dwarf, it's like, yes, but if you know anything, not if you know anything, but when it comes to genetics, if you have any siblings, you're not all the same size. You are not, like, you don't get the exact same genes. You might have, let's say, in a 10 egg clutch, if you're doing a mainland to a super dwarf, you might have some that are 75% super dwarf blood, because not everything, only things that are identical twins get identical. Other than that, it's throwing out different amounts of genes from both parents. Like me and my two sisters have different amounts of shit when we get your DNA done.
Yeah,
It's not like, oh, yep, we've got 25% Irish and it doesn't work like that. And so why would snakes work like that? And so you can't guarantee that it got 50% of the super dwarf blood, that in the 50% that's going to affect its size. Because I've seen two people that are 6 feet tall and a guy that, or in a girl that's 5'8", have a child that turns out to be 6'2".
Yeah.
Like, why would snake growth and snake genes be any different? Like, it's very misleading, the assuming that the size, because it has 50% blood of a super dwarf that it's going to grow at that rate. Just from an outsider's perspective, looking in, that's my opinion. Maybe there's been some actual breeding, but I'm sure there is a little bit of a difference. Like you breed a mainland to a super dwarf, I'm sure not all the babies are mainland size, and I'm sure they're not all super dwarf size. I bet you get a little bit of a mix.
No. So it depends on how you breed them and what you're doing for it. But reptiles, reptiles genetics are a lot different, especially because a lot of that stuff's happening and gets delivered through egg form, and then the embryo has to grow and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of different things, but this is also somewhat controversial. And I think there's a campaign in the Retic community to keep it muddied and confused and to kind of push out false narratives because it's very threatening to a lot of people that want to make money in doing this and trying to ride the super dwarf craze. But what I believe is the right way to like make super dwarfs and make snakes like retics smaller is if you're going to let's say we're going to bring ocelot in and we want to make a super dwarf and we want to make a small ocelot. The correct way and the proper way to do it is to take a pure female locality animal that's 6.5 feet or 7 feet or 5 feet, whatever you have of that locality. You take that pure locality female, you take the mainland morph male, and you breed that to that female. Because that female, the mitochondrial DNA is lined up on the female's chromosome. So she is dictating the life and the plan for the babies. She is dictating what they're going to grow. She's setting it up. And then they all develop and all that happens. So in some senses, like, yes, you're mixing. You don't know if you're going to get the mainland look or the super dwarf look or a mix of them both, but the size is not going to differ if you go that route. But also, it's not really going to differ if you go the other route, just you're not going to get what you expect. If you go a mainland female that's 14, 15 feet, or even 18 feet, and you breed a tiny little 5-foot super dwarf male, those babies are going to be bigger than the dad within the first year because the mom is fucking huge, and she set up the life plan for those babies to be huge. Not only that, those babies probably coming out of the egg will eat a small rat, whereas like the babies out of my super dwarfs are going to only eat pinky rats. So their starting point is completely different too. Their trajectory is different. Their life plan has been built differently for them. So that's why it is. You're right. Like you're right. Just because it says 50% super dwarf doesn't mean that's what you're getting. Because what has happened because of the retic craze, you have all these mainland guys or guys that have mainland females and stuff that were ready to breed. They just took pure males, ran them to them, made 50% technical super dwarfs by the market standards, but they're not. They're what I like to call fake super dwarfs. Those are super dwarfs that are going to be 8 to 12 feet, which are technically in line of what a dwarf, or what we call a dwarf, is supposed to be size-wise. But if you do it the right way, like I was doing, Bill has an example of it. Celeste, his golden child, she's only 50% super dwarf, 25% dwarf, and then 25% technically mainland. She's equal to a lot of people's pure super dwarfs because her mom and her grandparents' lineage, everything traces back from coming from a super dwarf pure female at the very beginning.
Okay. Yeah. So I could imagine that convolutes things a lot.
It does.
When you're like, well, this pairing is from the mom was of this and the dad was of that, and the
yes,
and that's the type of stuff that when you're breeding carpets and stuff, people were breeding to carpets into diamond pythons for a long time and ending up with these 87.3% diamond python, blah blah. So you start doing those things and you get really close, for one, to the look of one of the animals, but it also, those percentage labels eventually drop off and it becomes a pure diamond python in someone's collection where they bought it. It's actually a cross, but they didn't pay attention to that, the label. They saw it at the show. And that's what, in the carpet python community, a lot of people want to avoid. And that's why we do a lot of lineage charts and things like that, is so we know if there's a mysterious animal in the line of like, wait, where did this one come from? People look up the pairing. They're like, actually, that was actually an undocumented animal, so we don't know if that. And that's what's happened with a lot of jungle lines, is along the way someone had an animal that was a diamond jungle cross, and they just didn't realize until it was too late. And so when you get into those weird little situational things, it makes it very, it's not so tough for the breeders. It's in the sense of like, we all know what's going on. You put it in the hands of a customer and you have no idea what they're going to say about it and how they're going to try to sell it. If they are going to get out of the hobby or whatever, it might be easier just to call it a super dwarf because it's going to make it sell easier. And so we deal with a lot of that same stuff. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two communities of Retics and carpet pythons. Probably I would be so surprised if you could make that happen. But if pygmy pythons are eager little guys, so if any little snake's gonna do it, I think those tough ass little guys could do it. They're like they're nasty little pythons. But we deal with a lot of the stuff where we're kind of dealing with closed off, for the most part, gene pools and lines that have been around for a long time, and we're not too sure about histories of lines, and we've got percentage of mixed subspecies going on. And
yeah, but what I will give you guys is you guys are like definitely a lot more cordial and like trying to figure things out and trying to do the right things, whereas like you have people that are trying to do the right things and they have a belief or a theory that's been proven because these snakes have been breeding for 20 years. So like some of these arguments and debates have already been settled, but they keep getting, it's like with Retics, there is multiple different tribes and subsects that are out there on just a misinformation campaign to muddy up the information and muddy up all the legitimacy that people have put years of their work into to prove, just so that they can either basically take that sale away from that person that's been doing it right, so they can get a sale and give the customer something that they really aren't looking for and don't want. And they're trying to tell them, well, it doesn't exist. And that guy that's telling you that it exists because they do, he's a liar. And I'm going to just go on this campaign of just making sure that no one really fucking knows, especially if you're new. You're not going to get good information. We're going to muddy it up. You're going to get this and then that and then this, and you're not going to know what to believe. And then I'm just going to do my sales pitch to convince you to join my tribe. Like, that's what we have going on. It's wild.
Yeah, we don't have that. And I think a big reason why is because there's not that kind of money in carpet pythons. Like the most expensive morph combos you can possibly find right now, you'd be lucky to get $3,000 out of the most cutting edge, newest morph. I don't know what it's like in Retics.
You don't want to know.
Yeah,
you'll get sick.
Yeah, I've definitely seen snakes in the hobby going for 10 to 20 to 30K and stuff. That is not a thing in carpets. No one's gonna buy a carpet python for $8,000. I have not seen anyone spend that kind of money on carpets, and so it's definitely more of a niche community. You get way less people coming into the carpets to make money. If you're getting into carpets, it's because you're probably a pretty big snake nerd. And there's huge snake nerds in other communities for sure. But I'd say there's the people that get into carpets generally are they're passionate about them. It's not a snake they're trying to get to be. It's not a novelty thing. It's not this big giant snake you can pull out and wow everybody in the room with. They're a little more
that gets
subtle.
Old, huh, Levi? That gets old, huh? Pulling out the big old snake to impress everyone in the room. That gets pretty old pretty quick.
I don't know about all that.
But that's snake. Retics can
pulling it
do
out
it.
to clean it 2-3 times a week, that gets old.
There you go.
The wow factor is always going to be cool.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing it anyone sees a giant snake, they go, whoa, that is impressive. And carpet pythons, their impressiveness is more subtle. And you don't yeah, so you don't have the money aspect. They're ugly babies. They are definitely like a tough sell when it comes to baby carpet pythons, but then they get to adult size, you're like, okay, I get it now. So they're hard to sell when they're babies. Everyone holds on to their carpets generally for a year. It's just a hobby or a sector of the hobby that not a lot of people are pulled into. There's got to be some, usually it's not people's first snake. And it's not because they're hard to keep or anything. It's just they're not that popular. And there's not a lot of people talking about them. There's not a lot of YouTube content showcasing how cool they are. It's a little bit of an underground. It's like for people that listen to underground hip hop, like it's out there. And there's a plenty of it. But you kind of have to get in the know of the reptile community a little bit before you kind of learn about the reptile or the carpet python side of it and how intense. Because I mean, I'll say it straight up, Nick Mutton is one of the most probably intense personalities in the reptile hobby when it comes to his stern abrasiveness. He's the guy who wrote the books for our species, and he's on podcasts. And when you hear that guy talk, you're like, God, this guy is a nerd. Like, he is very scientific about stuff. And he's pretty much leading the charge in this country. And I'm not gonna, no disrespect to Nick, but he's not a super inviting person to be at the forefront of the hobby. He's more so gonna tell you like, that's a dumb idea for a pairing. Why would you ever want to do that? But he is so knowledgeable, and he wants to make sure people getting into carpet pythons are serious about it and for the thing he's been trying to build in our country. And so we don't have a super inviting face that is like getting like a bubbly personality. It's like an intense kind of buff guy who's talks very sternly to you and has his opinions. And he's right about pretty much most of the things he's going to talk about. But that's who a lot of people, if you want a carpet python, you go on Morph Market, a bunch of snakes are from Nick. And so you're going to cross paths with him, and he's going to want to call you on the phone and kind of let you know like his whole ordeal and how he does things before he sells you a snake. And so a lot of people they go to get into carpets, and they'll come across him and they'll be like, yo, this is my kind of guy. Or they'll be like, I'm not really that serious about it. But he's the guy that most people are going to have to come across when you're getting into the community. He wrote the books, and it's a lot of the ways that we kind of think about carpet pythons is because of him. And so it's a very niche community with very strong opinions and minds, but people that are helpful and friendly, even if they don't come across that way. They're just very stern and very passionate. But I'd say probably some of the most passionate guys are in carpet pythons. Excuse me.
So back to what you said about not being a beginner snake. I read somewhere, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in other parts of the world, carpet pythons are beginner snakes. Is that true?
Well, in Australia, they don't have ball pythons, and so their morph creation snakes are Antaresia, like the Stimson's pythons, the children's pythons, and the pygmy pythons, and then carpets. And so they are treating carpet pythons in Australia pretty similar to how we do boas, ball pythons here in this country, because they've got every single hobby that you're in, every aspect has people that are kind of business minded, and then there's people that are more so passionate about the snake. And so in Australia, you've got people keeping in these elaborate outdoor enclosures, and then you've got people breeding them by the hundreds and hundreds in racks. And so they I've heard of guys in Australia getting females to size to breed by 18 months. And
What is
that
the tip? What is the typical, by the way? I wanted to
three to,
ask you that.
3 to 5 years.
Wow.
The way that I raise females, I very rarely have them hit size by 3 years. Usually their fourth year,
Okay.
they go for me. But yeah, in Australia, there's a couple brothers that were early in the carpet morph game. They're called the K Brothers. They used to have a YouTube channel. It's still up, but K Brothers Pythons. And they were feeding their carpets 3 times a week, which is what ball python guys do here. And they were very successful with breeding, and they bred black-headed pythons that same way. But their carpets are a really pliable snake. You can make them grow super quick, you can grow them super slow, but they pretty much morph carpets the way that we morph ball pythons. That's why they've got the 4 gene, 5 gene carpets that are also a mix of diamond and Brettles and inland carpet. Like they cross all the subspecies, pretty much how the boa guys here do it. That's why I kind of compare it to how boa morph guys do, because they cross all the subspecies to make the combos out there in Australia.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense though. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your snake to mess with, like they don't get retics out there. So if you were in Australia, both of you guys would probably be keeping the next biggest snake that they got, which is going to be scrub pythons or carpets. I do feed chicks, and I'll feed quail. As far as temperaments, I don't really notice anything different, is if you're asking based on the meal that I'm feeding. But as far as like the temperament of my carpets, most of them, if you go reaching in, you'll probably get tagged based on a food response bite. So I just hook everything out similar to how I hear retic guys work their carpets. I hook it out. I can put most of my snakes just right in my hand once it's hooked out of the cage. But I'll probably get tagged by almost every snake if I just slide a tub open and reach in, because a lot of them are just sitting in ambush waiting for that meal. So you kind of got to get them out of the food mode, and then you're pretty good.
I think it's the thing with pretty much most, if not all, like arboreal or semi-arboreal snakes. They're very opportunistic, like feeders and stuff. So like whenever they think they're getting a shot or a chance to get something, they're going to take it. So I think
100%.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I don't think that person was talking about like the food. I think and correct me if I'm wrong in there. I think they were maybe talking about like jungles versus IJ versus Brettles versus Darwins. Is there a difference in temperament between those that you notice, or not really at all?
My Darwins are probably the most willing to take a shot. And I think it's because they are probably the closest to the wild type. Like all the other carpets I keep, they've been breeding in captivity those lines have been in captivity for a long time. Albinos and Darwins, especially, like I've got 2013 Darwin carpets that I mean are probably only the product of a few generations of breeding, like in captivity. So and then I'm breeding those to produce my babies, and so they're only one step more step out of their wild counterpart, so to speak. So I found my Darwins are pretty snappy. But it could be just how I keep my snakes. I don't spend a lot of time doing handling, and I've got maybe 120 to 100. During a baby season, I'll have close to 200 snakes, but it's mostly just going through, pulling them out when I'm cleaning and looking them over, making sure they're good, take a photo if they just shed or something like that. So that's really the only interaction I do with my snakes. Not a lot of them get pulled out for like a handling session. So I think a lot of my snakes, if you put them in someone's collection that's going to actually hold them and put in the time, they'll all figure it out pretty quickly. Like, they're not that bad, but they definitely aren't accustomed to just being held. I got a lot of snakes to pick just a couple favorites to hold. And so I just kind of treat pretty much everything the same.
Yeah. Well, I think too, a lot of like, and what we probably do now as breeders ourselves that sell to people, we give them info and try to set them up for success where we probably didn't when we were getting into these. Because just like you, when I was little, I was keeping all sorts of different species. A Savannah monitor, I think, was my actual first reptile. Like an adult female Savannah monitor was my first reptile. And then
nice.
Like, then I went into snakes and stuff from there. But like, no one really sets you up for success. So then you have all these, like, what I like to call one guys or whatever, where it's like for me, when growing up, was like, carpet pythons are assholes. They're all snappy. They're all meat. You know, same with like retics, or at least like, you know, it's probably still out there, like pied retics are assholes. Well, it's because they were like one of the newer morphs not too long ago and aren't that far away from wild caught and that stuff themselves. So it's kind of very similar in that. But, you know, they get a bad rap because, or, you know, we didn't get set up for success. Like, no one ever told you, yeah, these are, you know, ambush type predators. They're arboreal. It's kind of in their nature. You need to hook them, do tap training, pull them out with the hook, get them out of that mode, and then they're fine. No one ever told me that when I was getting any snakes. They're just like, yeah, just reach in there and grab it. And if it bites you, it bites you, whatever. And it's like, you know, and then you just end up having this fear, and you put this emotion on a snake that it really doesn't have by saying, oh, it's angry and it's mad and it's mean. And it's like, no one told you this is like, if you want to keep this snake and not get bit, this is how you do it. You want to handle this snake and not get bit, this is how you do it. So I make it a point when anyone looks at our retics, this is how you handle the retic. You're going to get told that it's mean, or you're going to think that it's mean because it's trying to bite as soon as you open up the cage. That's not, it's just hungry. Bring it out. So hook train it, bring it out with the hook, and it'll be just like it is right now in your hand. That's how this animal is.
Yeah.
But you have procedures you have to go through to get it out.
Yeah, 100%. And I also found that, like, snakes are definitely individuals where I found probably one in every like 2 clutches will have just a nightmare of a snake that wants to, like, it'll sit with its mouth open and hiss when all the other ones in the egg box are just totally chill. And so, like, the second that snake came out of the egg, it wants the smoke, it's willing, and it'll be like that for the first year or 2 of its life, where every time with carpet pythons, I call them squeezers, because you pull them out with the hook and they will literally wrap themselves around the hook and, like, even wrap their head in the hook, and then they get all frustrated because they've constricted their own head, and they just death grip onto whatever you touch them with. I've had them do it on my fingers before and freak out and biting my fingers and trying to wrap. And so that's what, like, just hooking them out. But even they'll wrap up the hook for 10 minutes and not let it go. And so there'll be like one of those snakes, a little squeezer, in every other clutch. Pretty much. So I'll produce like 2 or 3 of them a year, and they stay like that until they're almost like kind of sub-adults. At least they stay like that for me. And then they'll have a bunch of clutch mates that are totally chill and from the get-go don't worry about things. So yeah, you get a huge range in personalities for sure.
Yeah. One thing is more anecdotal for us, and it's something that Bill says too, is like what I've noticed, because I've only had a couple different females that I've had produced for me, in my experience with like my retics and super dwarfs and stuff. I've found in my short experience with these two females is like the babies took after the mothers' personalities. I mean, the dad was the same, and he was very chill and cool as well, but he was the same dad across both clutches. So the only difference was the moms. And the one mom, Celeste's mom, was a very, very good animal. Very, just very handleable, awesome animal. And my other female was a asshole from the day I got her. Just didn't want anything. Didn't ever want to be held. Like, she was cool to look at. She wouldn't strike at the cage. She just didn't want me to hold her. She'd do anything to keep me from holding her. So she just was not a hands-on snake. Believe it or not, like all of the one nice snake's clutches, I don't think I ever produced one snappy, bitey baby from her. Like, none of them ever were. Flip side, the other one, over half the clutch was just straight up pricks.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
true.
the holdback I have now is like very moody. Sometimes he'll let me hold him and be fine. And then other times he is just darting away from me as fast as he can and trying to piss on me to get away and everything, and just wild.
Yeah.
Just like his mom.
Yeah, see, that's I mean, that's what keeps it exciting, is being able to see things like that. I mean, it takes you probably a fair amount of years as a snake keeper to even realize something like that, and to kind of know to look for, or even pay attention that something like that would happen and why it would happen. But that's just what keeps it fun. Like, it's cool being in an industry that everyone can kind of be a pioneer and learn something for the entire community.
Yeah, that is cool. It is cool. And it's also, trying to have the misunderstood be understood. It's kind of also like our thing too. It's like, we're human just like you, and we have all these animals and we're not afraid of them. There's no reason to be afraid of them. Learn about them, hold them. And I mean, that's what I love about them.
Hell yeah, definitely.
So out of the 4 carpets that I've gotten, 2 around a year old, and then 2 that are TJs are younger. The one you gave me, the zebra, that one doesn't bite at all. It never is even struck. Now the caramel xanthic started biting me pretty good until about 3 handling sessions, and now he is done. He is fine. Now, of course, I hook everybody, but I mean, once he's out, he just quit doing it. And then my yearlings, I got one that wants to turn around and bite me, and one that's like the most gentle thing you could imagine. So it comes in all varieties,
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I think a lot of them you can work it out pretty quickly if you know what you're doing when it comes to just handling a snake. If you actually spend that time, you can calm down a good amount of snakes. Some are going to be outliers that are just always going to be crazy, but I'd say the majority of carpet pythons, even if they're snappy as babies and subadults, if you just put in a little bit of time and get them comfortable with the notion that they're going to get held, then they'll figure it out. Feel like they're probably not as dumb as we think. They probably have a little bit of intelligence when it comes. I mean, for instance, just the fact that they can be so prey specific based on just a smell, tells me that they're not just mindless, eating machines. The fact that a carpet python cannot even strike at a rat because it doesn't smell like a mouse, like, I bet you can take 10 people and put a mouse and a rat that are the same size and have the same amount of hair, and they couldn't tell you what was what. Like, a lot of people can't tell you the difference between a mouse and a rat, yet a carpet python can have just by looking and smelling at it, enough going on in its head to know, like, I don't want to eat that. When it's essentially to a human, we would say they're pretty similar animals, man. And so I don't know, little things like that make me wonder, like, what else are they remembering? Do they know what a human smells like? And do all humans smell like, because all mice smell like all mice to them, but do all humans smell like humans to them? So, like, or do certain humans smell better and more, like, in a way that they feel less defensive or whatever it might be? So who knows? Some people could put off a pheromone that makes a snake like, oh, this is fine. And then they put off a pheromone that makes a snake like, yo, I don't like being held. Like, horses have that sense of of being able to kind of figure out what's going on. And if a person's nervous around a horse, the horse gets nervous, kind of thing. There's got to be some kind of element of that going on with snakes too.
I agree with that 100%.
But who knows? A lot of these things are just going to be guesses, and I don't think there's enough money in reptiles for there to be any significant, like, research breakthroughs on the way that a snake's brain works. It's going to be some snake keeper that wants to figure that out. It's not going to be some college that's like, you know what we need is to figure out what snakes are thinking. Like, it's not advantageous to people unless you're a snake breeder to know what a snake's thinking.
Yeah.
So things like that we'll probably never figure out. Maybe we'll have a good idea of people in the hobby based on our anecdotal evidence, but I think so much of this stuff is going to be forever unknown, and that's kind of cool to be in that frontier, I guess, of the forever mysterious.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right, boys. I think this was a great episode. I think we definitely didn't clear up what's better, but we definitely talked about keeping them both and the similarities and a little bit of differences and stuff like that. But this was a good one. We'll have to have some part twos because there were some things we didn't get to that I want to get on with you, but maybe it won't be so much a Retics versus type situation. It'll just be kind of spotlighting you, and I want to get to know more about how you keep and breed these things and stuff like that. So we'll have you back on for sure. Anything else for you boys?
We want to talk about some of the genetics too next time, TJ. Like we were talking about Ocelot and Jaguar and some of the, we didn't get into that, but we could do that next time too.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure. I'm sorry I can rant and you get me talking about something dumb and small, and I'll just keep going and not realize that I'm getting off track. But
no worries.
Yeah.
It's long form podcast, man. That's how it works.
Yep.
But alrighty. All right. We'll see y'all next week. Like, share, subscribe. Woo! I did it again 2 weeks in a row.